And at 10, breaking and entering. This kid is known for breaking into the Pizzaplex, as we learn through the therapy CDs that you can find at the end of the game. The ones revolving around Client 46 are certainly intended to be Gregory, and every time he breaks in, he ends up getting caught on camera or by technicians or someone working there. Enough times to actually mention it to his therapist, who then brings it up with Gregory. Breaking and entering would actually be what he'd be charged with if he wasn't under 12 and seemingly could actually get caught. But despite a few witnesses, the cameras never get a solid shot of him. Probably due to Vanny, since the camera was distorted when talking to something with bunny ears. I originally thought this distortion could be Gregory being a robot, however it was pointed out to me in the comments of the Gregory is in therapy theory video that the distortion was most likely due to Vanny. And at 9, trespassing. Okay, so while yes he does break into the Pizzaplex, he also ends up trespassing the entirety of the game. That's literally the premise behind this game. Gregory is trapped in there after it's closed, which instantly makes it trespassing. Like how you aren't supposed to stay overnight in a Walmart like people used to claim they were doing in YouTube videos. Yeah, well if they actually did that, it's trespassing. And so with this, he gets told to leave multiple times and the security guard is at least seemingly trying to help him get home. At least legally speaking she is. So assuming he ends up getting caught, he could be charged. Although with everything else that happened, I don't think they'd actually end up charging him. But he even goes into restricted sections of the Pizzaplex, like where we find the true ending and where we go after we crush Chica. So yeah, he's definitely trespassing in the entirety of this game. Ironically, he only ends up getting killed when he stops. And at 8, steals security badges. Not only is this just like a stealthy kid, he's also a thief. This guy steals so many things from the Pizzaplex, like not to mention all the little gift boxes you can find around. He also steals all the security badges that end up getting him level 7 clearance as a 6-year-old or however old he is. It's really unclear because he can't ride the go-karts alone and he can fit in Freddy's chest cavity but can also speak full sentences with proper grammar and stuff. No idea how old he is, but he's still able to gain level 7 clearance. That's ridiculous. I don't think I would technically count it as impersonating a security guard because he's not really doing that, but that is absolutely stealing. And this isn't the only time too. He steals more than just some prizes and some badges. It gets even worse than just stealing. Like worse in both the vein of the severity of the crime and in general the severity of the stealing. And at 7, memory loss? For a kid who is more than willing to climb inside Freddy and also get decked out in Fazbear Entertainment merch, he sure seems to forget quite a bit about these animatronics. Gregory, while stumbling on his own name, may not show obvious signs of memory loss. When he gets trapped in a security office when Chica's outside the door, his only way out is to make a pizza using a robot. Now he asks Freddy why he needs to or even should do this, and Freddy's response is because Chica loves pizza. Of course Chica loves pizza! That's been her brand since the start, for like 40 years in this series. There have been memes about how much Chica loves pizza. They made a whole Mazer-size center because Chica loved pizza so much and they wanted to explain how she lost her weight. Gregory even catches her eating garbage and pizza, for God's sake. And he doesn't know that she loves pizza? How? How does he not know that when wearing both a Fazbear Entertainment shirt and shoes? Yeah, seems a little sus if you ask me. Gregory definitely should be venting. And at 6, resisting arrest. So while most reports of resisting arrests are exaggerated, when it comes to Gregory, I don't really think it is. This man literally escapes the lost and found room while the police are supposed to be on their way. Yes, Vanny is coming to kill us, but if you think about it, you can escape even before we are aware of Vanny's presence, meaning that we are actively resisting arrest, or as close to arrest as it can be. Technically, if we look at it in a certain way, it could be considered a citizen's arrest, and I know that it's not how it would work in real life, okay? So cool your jets before you comment. Wait, you already did comment? You were complaining about an earlier number? Wow. Who cares if it's not how things would work in the real world? This is a game! Afton wouldn't work like he does in the real world. Possession doesn't exist in the real world. So just like cool it, okay? Gregory is resisting arrest for breaking out of the lost and found room, and he also stole a screwdriver that he uses to do it. Plus, removing vent covers could also be considered. Halfway through into number 5, not a snitch. Okay, I don't know how Gregory survived security breach in general, alright? There were plenty of times that this kid could have got. Particularly though, when Freddy gets grabbed by the Moondrop animatronic right outside parts of service. You're telling me that Moondrop, the daycare attendant, the guy who has been chasing us every hour on the hour, told Vanessa that Freddy was in the parts and service room, but didn't mention that we were in the recharge station right next to it? He knew we were there. He waved at us while taking Freddy away. And then Vanessa talks to Freddy as if she doesn't know that we're listening in. It's almost like they're putting on a show. Like, sure, the daycare daycare attendant isn't able to get us while we're in a recharge station, but we clearly aren't visible to him. He waved. So why wouldn't he also inform Vanessa about a kid in the recharge station while also saying, oh yeah, and I got Freddy? Okay, and if he did, why not bring that up when talking to Freddy instead of just asking him if he's helping us? Okay, it doesn't make sense. Daycare attendant not ratting on us is definitely a lucky moment, okay? I guess maybe he knows that snitches get stitches and that Gregory will tear him limb from limb with a smile on his face if he did, so maybe that's how it works. In it for fraud. Technically speaking, Gregory also commits fraud by getting into the Pizzaplex and the daycare center. The definition of fraud is, quote, wrongful or criminal deception intended to result in financial or personal gain. And he was personally gaining from using that Mr. Hippo magnet on the ticket machine and getting into the Pizzaplex for free. So within the first 25 minutes of the game, we're already committing multiple crimes. And if the magnet messed with the machine even more, then we end up committing at least 3 different crimes within the first 25 minutes. Theft, fraud, and vandalism if the machine gets messed up, not to mention the whole trespassing and breaking and entering thing. Yeah, Gregory has quite the rap sheet after this game. Even within the first hour of the game, this guy has some serious issues. Maybe this kid isn't Afton, considering how like nonchalant he is with committing so many freaking crimes. Getting close to the end in number 3, potential robot. The possibility that Gregory is a robot is still a thing at the time of recording. So let's talk about the random bits that make Gregory seem more like an animatronic than a human. There's the fact that he's literally smaller than a 4-year-old, however is able to speak full sentences and do literally everything else he does in this game, which seems like he's a rogue robot that's been active for a long time. He can also get all CRT, glitchy-eyed whenever Vanny's around, similar to an effect where you'd hold up a magnet to like one of those old TVs. It's kind of like that. There's Freddy's shock as to how he sees Gregory after getting Roxy's eyes, and there's also the fact that literally nothing else makes sense about him unless he's a robot. It explains why he's homeless, it explains why he's willing to kill, because you know, no moral code, why Vanny would be willing to bring him to William if he's supposed to be Crying Child but as a robot. It explains why Afton takes over Freddy and not Gregory if he's still meant to be Crying Child, and basically makes this whole game make a lot more sense. So, is he a robot? Currently unknown, but it is certainly a possibility. And ultimately, in at number 2, hacked animatronics. Assuming Gregory is Client 46, which is kind of required for this list, he's also guilty of hacking the animatronics, as we learned multiple times throughout his sessions. The only issue I have now is why is he hacking the animatronics? Like, he definitely had a purpose, since to quote Disc 16, what I understand is that the glitch stopped being a glitch and turned into an intentional set of subroutines that were aimed at creating the same thing the glitch created. Those subroutines seem to have come from you. Can you explain that? And I think that I can explain that. There's like a good and an evil motive for this hack, depending on which one they want to be canon. The evil motive would be that Gregory was just working with William and Vanessa, so he hacked the animatronics and made sure the glitch he caused instilled itself into the robots so that his work couldn't be undone, to end up distracting all the employees from what's really going on in the Pizzaplex. The good intention, which is the one I think would push the story further ahead, and is probably the more likely one, would be that he lied about his family to the therapist so that he could keep seeing them, and he would have more time in the company building so that he could hack the animatronics, causing them to malfunction in an effort to get the company or the FNAF AR special delivery project shut down. Hence why the glitch ended up being a closed loop where it was replicating itself over and over so it couldn't be deleted. And finally, in at number 1, kills Vanny. In the phaser blast ending, the one where you push the button instead of playing Princess Quest 3, Gregory actually orders the robots to disassemble Vanny. Gregory being willing to kill Vanny is so messed up, especially if this kid is meant to be like 10 or 11, which is what everyone seems to believe, even though I think he's 6. Even then, that's still pretty screwed, but you could argue that he doesn't know any better. But clearly, Gregory does know better. This kid is easily able to destroy all 3 animatronics without a moment's hesitation, and then use their upgrades on Freddy. He is willing to kill Vanny, like I said, despite actually seemingly knowing her, like we see in the best ending, and he burns Burn Trap multiple times in an attempt to stop him from taking control over Freddy. So what the living hell is this kid doing, and how is he so nonchalant about this whole thing? This guy kills Vanny, and then only gets emotional and starts crying when he has to talk to a destroyed Freddy. Like, dude, Vanny is literally gushing blood next to you. Like, right there. Couldn't you have just said, like, stop or restrain? Not freaking disassemble? Like, I get that she said that about Freddy and that it's up in your noggin, okay? But dude, you're not panicking. about literally everything else that I've mentioned on this list. Gregory commits murder in one of the endings to this game. What the hell is this kid? Now, based on the points I made last time, there are a few things that we need to go over. Firstly, the breaking and entering does not apply in the actual game, but can come into play later on. He is 100% trespassing though, despite being locked inside. He actively hid inside of Freddy, like in his stomach, instead of leaving the Pizzaplex, which would make this trespassing. Every time I mention stealing, like in the merch, the security badges, even Freddy, there's no arguing that. He does in fact steal those. The main argument against these is that, well, he needs to do this to survive, which is blatantly not true. Okay, Freddy informs Gregory that the doors will reopen at 6 a.m. All Gregory needs to do at that point is just stay in Freddy's green room or the area behind it until 6. Nothing else was necessary in order for him to survive. The only problems occur when Gregory tries to get out sooner. He causes his own problems. Vanny only ends up knowing Gregory is in the Lost and Found because she put him there as Vanessa. So, with that logic in mind, Vanny would not have known that Gregory was in Freddy or Freddy's green room. He says that himself. And Vanessa does not check inside Freddy when you approach her while piloting him. So as far as the argument that he needed to do this to survive, no he didn't. Unless he ends up making the problems himself, which would completely destroy his case. So, glad we got that settled. One of the other points of contention was really everything else he did was in self-defense. He had to destroy the animatronics. He had to kill Vanny in the phaser blast ending, otherwise they would have killed him. But while self-defense does sometimes justify killing in order to protect yourself or your loved ones, this is typically used for human-on-human interactions. Human-on-robot interactions wouldn't necessarily fall under self-defense. The animatronics would have to be proven that they didn't intend to harm Gregory, and this could be done using code analysis and camera footage. However, we know that the animatronics were hacked, and whoever Client 46 is did the hacking. Now, if Client 46 is Gregory, which in the context of this world, they would know, and the evidence seems to actually point to, the fact that the animatronics were after him could be seen as his fault, since he actually disturbed their original programming. This is also where the footage of him in the Pizzaplex would have come out, particularly the image where he was talking to someone with rabbit ears, thus showing the jury that Gregory and Vanny had a personal relationship, further hurting his case. Gregory by no means had to destroy the animatronics. He chose to do it. Freddy even asks him not to. Gregory didn't do it because he had to, he did it because he wanted revenge. He even says it himself, quote, "They get what they deserve." He was destroying them for revenge and to get the parts for Freddy, not so that they wouldn't hurt him. Since after all, they can still come and kill him after he destroys them. So he does destroy property because he wanted the animatronics to suffer, not because he had to in order to be safe again. Again, could have just hid in Freddy's room or somewhere else. People are also saying that he's homeless, so he has to steal. Firstly, homeless or not, it's still illegal to steal. And secondly, I don't think that he needs Roxy balloons, action figures, and stuffed characters in order to survive another day. I'm not saying that he shouldn't keep himself alive, I'm just saying that what he's doing is illegal, which is true no matter who you are. And anything I included in those numbers was not a story item, and instead the extra items that you do not need in order to beat the game. And you didn't need to steal Freddy at all. There is no justification for him running off with Freddy other than the fact that they're friends. But then again, it's grand larceny and illegal. One commenter decided to try and provide legal defense for Gregory in a lighthearted manner because that was also the point of the video. So I'd like to reply to Jason Ross's defense for the theft of security badges. Quote from his comment: "While this is technically a crime, I think he could make a strong case with any halfways decent lawyer that he did so out of necessity. He stole stuff to help further his attempts to escape unlawful confinement and other crimes committed against him. Stealing those items he stole was necessary to save himself. He would never have survived the night if he didn't steal." First of all, you just outright admitted that it was a crime, which an actual attorney would have torn to shreds. Secondly, like I've been saying, he could have been hiding the entire time, okay? He would have survived if he had just hid until 6. He doesn't escape any sooner than 6 a.m. You progressing throughout the game just makes the time go to 6. He never escapes sooner. He did not have to steal the security badges. Unlawful confinement, as you said, is described as whoever wrongfully restrains a person as to prevent that person to move beyond a certain restricted limit is said to have committed the offense of wrongful confinement. However, nobody restrains Gregory, literally, as well. Like, they don't actually like time anything. He gets himself locked in the Pizzaplex. Nobody locked him in there intentionally. The doors close automatically at midnight, and he had plenty of time to leave, but didn't, and he chose to climb inside Freddy, which also ruins your argument against trespassing, which was also wrongful confinement. And for all intents and purposes, in the eyes of the law and any outsiders, Vanessa was actively trying to help him. There are recordings of her claiming to have called the police, which would have been verified certainly, but even if she had called them and claimed something else, the record of her calling 911 would be there. Most of Ross's case relies on unlawful confinement. However, staying in somewhere and then wanting to leave does not constitute unlawful confinement. And to the public, Vanessa was trying to help get him home, but he was avoiding her. We know that she was trying to kill him, but the public doesn't. Now for the biggest issue that everyone seemed to have with this list, the one that I'm sure y'all clicked on this video for. The claim that killing Vanny was murder and not self-defense. And this claim is really the reason I wanted to make this video, because I can't reply to every single comment that was referring to this, okay? Self-defense can be a defense to an assault, battery, and criminal homicide because it always involves the use of force. Most states have special requirements when the defendant uses deadly force in self-defense. Deadly force is defined as any force that could potentially kill. An individual does not have to actually die for the force to be considered deadly. Examples of deadly force are the use of a knife, gun, vehicle, or even bare hands when there is a disparity in size between the two individuals. Or, in this case, the use of animatronic robots to kill Vanny, as Gregory does in the phaser blast ending, which would also set a precedent for robots being counted as deadly force. To successfully claim self-defense, a defendant must prove 4 elements. First, with exceptions, the defendant must prove that he or she was confronted with an unprovoked attack. Second, the defendant must prove that the threat of injury or death was imminent. Third, the defendant must prove that the degree of force used in self-defense was objectively reasonable under the circumstances. And fourth, the defendant must prove that he or she had an objectively reasonable fear that he or she was going to be injured or killed unless he or she used self-defense. The Model Penal Code defines self-defense as justifiable when the actor believes that such force is immediately necessary for the purposes of protecting himself against the use of unlawful force by such other person on the present occasion. Okay, so I'm willing to admit that the attack was certainly unprovoked. Vanny did not need to come after him in order to get him out of the Pizzaplex. However, that second issue, the proof of threat of injury or death was imminent, is where things get complicated. At no point in the game does Vanny directly threaten Gregory with any words. Her voice lines include, "See you soon," "Disassemble Freddy," "There you are you having fun yet?" laughter, and "Let's have some fun." While menacing, none of these involve a direct threat. At no point in the game does she brandish a knife or even send the security bots after Gregory to disassemble him. She only sends the 3 main ones to collect him, who also make no appearance in this ending, therefore do not count. Yes, when she catches us we get a game over screen, but that's just us losing the game. That isn't necessarily us being killed. Us thinking that we get killed is simply an assumption because we don't see what happens next. However, in this case, since we made it to the end, Gregory had never been caught by Vanny. While yes, she does end up destroying an animatronic, it was just an animatronic. That's not really a threat on Gregory. Now, let's skip point number 3 for a minute and then move on to point number 4. That the defendant must prove that he or she had an objectively reasonable fear that he or she was going to be injured or killed unless they used self-defense. While yes, Gregory is a child, or seemingly a child, who would have a more extreme view of the world, he literally spent 6 hours running and hiding from Vanny, where he ended up surviving. In fact, he was right at the Pizzaplex door to leave, but instead of leaving, he chose to go after Vanny, thus turning this act of possible self-defense into a possible act of vigilantism, or even turning Gregory into the aggressor. He and Freddy went to confront Vanny. He says himself maybe that they can catch her in her room at Phaser Blast. Gregory could have left and survived, but chose not to, meaning that he cannot claim self-defense in an altercation that he created. And now for the final point. The defendant must prove that the degree of force used in self-defense was objectively reasonable under the circumstance. Now, being a child, there is a leeway as to what he would deem reasonable force, but in this case, it is absolutely not reasonable force. We see how destroyed Freddy is after he gets disassembled, okay? His chest and torso are gaping open. He had his insides ripped out. And then he even ends up like dying in an animatronic sense, even though his body and his head have been shown to work separately. And then Gregory orders the same thing done to Vanny, a human who would be alive as the animatronics ripped her ribs and intestines from her body. Does that sound reasonable to you? Because killing in self-defense is easiest to claim when the death you cause is quick or painless. But Vanny suffered, and suffered hard. Even criminals on death row do not get this treatment. A serial killer with more kills than Vanny would just get the simple 2-dose lethal injection, where the first dose actually is intended to dull the pain of the second dose. Under absolutely no circumstances would Vanny being torn apart so badly that the comic panels won't even show it be considered the proper amount of force. Especially when he could have said anything to stop or break or even kill. He could have just said kill. This is absolutely over the top, especially given that Gregory seems to have known her if he is indeed Client 46, which is also hinted at during the Princess Quest ending, but since that's a different ending, that doesn't really count here. Which, if he was Client 46, that would have appeared in court. So what kind of charges and juvenile time is Gregory facing because of this? Well, if Gregory had Mac Murdock as a lawyer, let's say, or as someone who's also a really good lawyer, they could possibly argue that this would rather be manslaughter than murder. However, Gregory knows what disassemble means, so an argument that this was an accident would be very tough to pull off. But looking at the minimum sentence, there are 3 possible outcomes for how he'd be treated. 1, the child is so young or mentally incompetent to not understand what they've done and are excused for criminal and civil liability from their actions. Not the case for Gregory, who knew full well what was going on the entire time throughout this game. 2, the child is old enough to understand what they have done, but not old enough or lacking in evidence of sufficient premeditation to charge them as an adult, so they are charged and tried as juveniles, which could be the case for Gregory and is the most likely outcome. And then 3, the child is old enough to understand what they have done and there is evidence of planning and premeditation such that they can be deemed to have acted as an adult might, and they are charged as an adult, with the exception that minors may not be sentenced to death. Now, this could be the way that the courts decided to go, since after all, Gregory did intend on confronting Vanny, since he could have left the Pizzaplex but instead went after her. If he is Client 46 as well, the images of him breaking into the Pizzaplex before could be interpreted as premeditation, especially if he was investigating the Pizzaplex because of Vanny. The state could also argue that his intention was always to kill her. So, with these rules in mind, we will look at a minimum and maximum sentence. The minimum would be a manslaughter charge. However, unlike murder, manslaughter does not carry an automatic sentence of life imprisonment. It remains, however, an opinion for the court. But looking at the situation, things wouldn't look too good for Gregory. A 9-year sentence, which is not uncommon, would allow the offender to be paroled after serving 3 years of their sentence. If a firearm is involved in the offense though, a minimum sentence of 4 years is required. And while the weapon was not a firearm, it could be argued that since she was a distance from him, that it could also be considered similar. So at least Gregory would be looking at 3 to 9 years for manslaughter. If he was charged with murder, however, he would absolutely be tried as an adult. And since this is the worst case, we'll go with first-degree murder, since the court could consider this planned and deliberate. Those convicted of first-degree murder all receive the same sentence: life imprisonment with parole eligibility after 25 years. A 20-year-old convicted of first-degree murder will be eligible for parole at the age of 45, and if they behave themselves, then they're likely to receive parole. But considering Gregory's personality and your comments on that top 10 video, I doubt that he'd admit responsibility, show remorse. He doesn't seem like that kind of person. Although after 25 years, he may start looking at things differently, with new eyes, if you will. This is also if he ends up actually aging, because he's a real human and not a robot like we're all thinking. And if he doesn't age, a whole new investigation is gonna happen. So let's not get into that. In at 10 paint cans. After starting the game and getting to the free roam section of Security Breach, where you have the tutorial for distracting animatronics, I just want to mention how goddamn lucky that is. Okay, one of the animatronics that you're going to need to avoid, no matter how damn fine she is, you need to avoid her, is literally eating garbage right in your way. But somehow somehow there's also a stack of paint cans randomly on a random cart in the middle of the hall in front of you. The cart is also for some reason blocking the hall, which I'm sure multiple employees love having to take the long way around, but it's fine that it's blocking the way because you can knock over these convenient and empty paint cans so that Chica will come and investigate it. I'd say her taking the way that she does is also lucky. However, this is like one of the only times where pathing makes sense since she's right next to the door that she ends up using, and I think that any other person in this situation would have done the same thing. However, one thing that I don't understand is in 9, inconvenient exit. During the so-called interrogation and torture scene in Parts and Service, from what I've been seeing YouTube videos titled online, Vanessa is questioning Freddy about Gregory and accusing him of helping Gregory, which I mean is true, but she shouldn't have to actually accuse him of that. More on that later. But after telling him that she's gonna leave him down there until his casing can be put on a new endo, which doesn't really make sense if the coating is the issue and not the endoskeleton, like, still, why would you leave to go to Rockstar Row through Roxy's lift when you could easily have just turned around to come our way and head into the main atrium? That's where Gregory is for the majority of the game. That's where all the animatronics have been spotting him, and it would make more sense to go there than to Rockstar Row, where maybe he was seen twice at this point. I don't know, it seems weird to me, but the reason that this is lucky is because had she chosen to go the more logical route, which would have been towards us, she would have walked through the doors we were hiding behind, and it's not like we have much room to hide around them, okay? The walls on either side of this door are made of glass. She would see us run into the charging station or wherever else we went. So yeah, her choosing to exit in the most inconvenient way to her actually ends up helping us out. And at 8, Freddy. Just everything that Gregory does with Freddy seems to work out eventually, even if not at first. Look at what he does before the doors actually close the first time. He sends us to get a pass in order to free him from the green room, and then everything seems to be going well. But then for some random reason, without ever mentioning this before, he tells us that he senses that we are broken and that he needs to bring us to a medical tent so that he can fix us up. Whether this was meant to be a nod to Crying Child or not in this case doesn't matter. Point is here that it didn't do anything, okay? We get a run-in with Vanessa that later turns into a TikTok meme, but other than that, we stay the same, okay? We don't get healed, we don't get a band-aid because we could have had the one that's on his character from the start, and we get in that booth, instantly turn around to watch the Vanessa and Freddy scene, and then after that, we leave instantly, and Freddy never mentions how we're still broken. And being broken, in this case, never seems to come up again or cause us any issues. Especially since now, with that little pit stop, even if you go full steam ahead, you can't make it out of the front doors in time. That one little interaction is the 30 seconds that we needed in order to escape out the front doors, but thanks to Freddy, we didn't make it. But he still doesn't abandon us. He just tries to help. I mean, I don't know, it's off, okay? And if Freddy is evil, him not revealing it there and then is definitely lucky as hell. And at 7, steals merch. While yes, Gregory does steal multiple items while we play the game, he's also stolen some stuff prior to the game starting. If you pay attention to his character model and some of the comic panels and various endings, we can see that his shirt and shoes are at the very least are Freddy Fazbear themed. They have Freddy's head on them, and considering how this kid has no home, sleeping in a cardboard box at the end of the worst ending, I doubt he could really afford to properly purchase Fazbear Entertainment clothing. And considering how he's breaking in, I feel like it's needless to say that he stole the clothes off of Fazbear's back. This is why they have to keep reopening, otherwise they'd be so bankrupt the current CEO, whoever they are, would end up having to actually also live in a cardboard box. This kid alone is the reason they can never fully close and have to keep reopening. Like, honestly, that's probably the only way them reopening makes sense, aside from them being money hungry who don't care about how many children actually perish for them to live their comfortable lives. And at 6, Disassemble. In the Phaser Blast ending, the one where, you push the button instead of playing Princess Quest 3, Gregory actually ends up ordering the robots to disassemble Vanny. Gregory being willing to kill Vanny here is pretty messed up. However, it's lucky that these staff bots even understood that command. Okay, Vanny is a human, not something that's typically seen as capable of disassembly, okay? When a serial killer hacks up a body, okay, the police don't say that the victim was disassembled, they say they were dismembered, okay? This guy kills Vanny and then only gets emotional when he has to go talk to a destroyed Freddy. Okay, like, dude, okay, Vanny is literally bleeding out next to you. We saw what happened to Freddy, okay? That was the disassembly. So, yeah, couldn't you just have said, like, stop or restrain Vanny? Particularly stop, okay? You didn't have to say freaking disassemble. I get that she said that about Freddy and it was fresh in your mind, but dude, okay? You're not panicking about literally anything else. And if the robots hadn't understood that command because, you know, humans aren't disassembled, then it would have caused you a hell of a lot of pain. It worked on Freddy because robots can be disassembled because they get assembled in the first place. But now I am definitely going to start calling pregnancy assembling a human now, so that's fun. Thanks for that. Halfway through into number 5, extreme measures. Speaking of which, Gregory being willing to kill Vanny at the end of the phaser blast room is pretty messed up, especially if this kid is meant to be like 10 or 11, which is what everyone seems to believe. This kid is easily able to destroy all 3 animatronics without a moment's hesitation and then use their upgrades on Freddy. He is willing to kill Vanny, like I said, despite actually seemingly knowing her, like we see in the best ending, and he burns Burn Trap multiple times in an attempt to stop him from taking control over Freddy. So, what the absolute living hell is this kid doing, and how is he so nonchalant about this whole thing? This guy kills Vanny and then only gets emotional when he has to go and talk to a destroyed Freddy. Like, dude, Vanny is literally bleeding out mere feet from you. Couldn't you have just said, like, stop Vanny or restrain Vanny, not freaking disassemble Vanny? I get that she said that about Freddy and it's fresh on your mind, but dude, you're not panicking about literally anything else. So just say something that doesn't involve a human dying, for God's sakes. Especially if you know her. And at 4, destruction. Speaking of tearing animatronics limb from limb, isn't it convenient that there is a way to break every other animatronic that isn't Freddy, and then that leaves the animatronic broken in the right way to remove whatever aspect that you actually needed to upgrade Freddy? Hell yeah, it is. It's so lucky that there is somehow a way to break each of the animatronics in the perfect amount for the animatronics as well, okay? And it works the first time. And even with Chica, okay, we push her into a trash compactor and somehow don't get crushed ourselves, despite her grabbing onto our leg, okay? We only get pulled into another area that we can still get back to the Pizzaplex through, instead of being pulled into the trash compactor and crushed. So yeah, needless to say that looking at it logically, it's extremely lucky that there is a way to destroy each of the evil animatronics in a way that allows us to access their specific upgrades. Even though we didn't need to crush the animatronics and instead it could have just chilled in Freddy's green room until 6 a.m. when the doors opened. So yeah, lucky us! Getting close to the end, and in number 3, grand larceny. Stealing a boatload of trinkets, it's fine. Assuming that we gave a pass to Gregory, okay? He still commits grand larceny, which in the US is typically seen as stealing anything with a combined value of $400 or more, or something that would cost over $400 to replace in a reasonable amount of time. If we ignore the 87 collectible prize boxes found throughout the game, which would easily equal over $400, he still steals Freddy at the end of the game! In multiple endings, Freddy and Gregory leave without a care in the world, including the canon ending. And before you say, Connor, I'm calling BS, Freddy chose to leave with Gregory in those endings. Freddy is a robot. He is an animatronic. He cannot physically make that choice. He is property of Fazbear Entertainment. He is not a living being. He has no rights. He is an object in the most literal sense of the word, which makes me think that we need to start advocating for animatronic rights now. I mean, Freddy didn't consent to Gregory climbing inside him the first time, so Gregory in theory should be getting charged with a whole lot more than just grand larceny for stealing Freddy. And if you tell me that you don't think replacing Freddy in a reasonable amount of time would cost more than $400, I need you to leave this video. Thank you. He would probably be the most expensive one to replace, I'm sure. And ultimately, in number 2, boy genius. The absolute mountain of knowledge that this kid has exceeds my own, okay? This kid is the size of a 4-year-old. He can fit inside Freddy, baby strollers, like popcorn kind of vending cart things that you can find around the Pizzaplex, and various other small areas. He's too small to drive one of the go-karts alone and has to get one of his, like, the instructor bot things, but he knows how to restart generators, operate a trash compactor. He's strong enough to restart generators. And he's also capable of driving a car, as well as identifying the car battery, connecting jumper cables on a car battery properly, and then using those to fix Freddy's recharging issue, okay? How does this make any sense? And how do they solve that issue in literally any other ending, okay? Because Freddy is still going to need to recharge every hour, supposedly, or at least he says that he does. I don't really believe that that's a story for another day. But like, how does this happen? Okay, Okay, how do they solve that issue? This kid knows more words than I do, but is somehow the size of a 4-year-old. Maybe even smaller, okay? It makes absolutely no sense. And this kid's weird superpower is what makes this game so confusing. It really only makes sense if he's a robot that's supposed to mimic a toddler who's been operational for decades and has been learning the whole time, okay? Or that Security Breach is really just a cleverly skinned Jimmy Neutron fan game, okay? Which one is more likely here? And finally, in at number 1, Free Roam Freddy. We've talked a lot about the parts and service section, okay? Because Gregory just seems to have gotten extremely lucky at multiple points in this chapter of the game, one after the other. However, the luckiest, I think, comes from after Vanessa leaves Freddy in parts and service. She says that it's so that his casing can be put on a new endo after either corporate gives the green light or they have someone on the clock who can actually just remove it and put it on someone else. But she doesn't seem to be suspicious that he's walking around Rockstar Row literally within like maybe 3 minutes if you've played the section before and don't mess up the memory game, okay? Like, who would have repaired him if not Gregory? There is literally no other living human in the Pizzaplex at this point, and the whole containment cylinder thing is to protect human beings. There are no staff bots in parts and service, and the reason you had to leave him there was because nobody else is working since it's after midnight. Why would Vanessa be so chill about Freddy walking around after that? I mean, like, she literally left him with his head removed, and if she assumed that somehow he did it himself, why wouldn't she then confine him to his room if he's that suspicious? Especially after just accusing him of helping to protect Gregory. It was something that confused me so much in my first playthrough, so I figured that Vanessa would pull us out of Freddy if we got too close. But I walked up to her to test it, and nothing. It would have been easy to make just a little modification to her code for this part of the game and make her actually be like, why are you here? Rip out Freddy. Or rip out Gregory, not Freddy. But like, come on, you could have made Vanessa a little bit more dangerous at this point, but no, okay? Gregory venting certainly isn't the only thing that's sus about this game. Let me just say that. And at 9, homeless. The fact that Gregory also appears to be homeless is an entirely other thing. Like normally, if a child is homeless or an orphan, he'd be taken to an orphanage or to family to stay with. Yet somehow, this child has been able to avoid every form of law enforcement that's noticed him, or just avoided detection altogether, and that seems fairly insane to me. However, these are also the police that couldn't find the original 5 missing children's bodies after the animatronics were literally leaking blood, but that's aside the point. You'd think that this kid, after being locked in a Pizzaplex overnight, would be willing to go to an orphanage to make sure that he was safe, because, you know, a psychopathic killer bunny was after you for 6 hours. But no. My question is, why did Gregory just go and why did he hide in the Pizzaplex if he was really homeless? Like, I'm sure that Freddy could have kept him in his green room and just let him sleep. Or hell, let Gregory sleep in his stomach while Freddy made sure that he was getting to the recharge stations every hour like he needed to normally. It just seems like it could have been avoided. And it should have been avoided. And at 8, height. Now, Gregory's height compared to his age has always been something that's bothered me. So, to really calculate how tall Gregory is, I did a good old pixel measurement off the Funko statue of Gregory and Freddy. Now, assuming that Glamrock Freddy's height is the same as Rockstar Freddy, which ends up being around 6.1 feet, which is, let's be honest, going to give Gregory the best chance here, that means that Freddy's 570 pixels in this instance, for how I was doing it, ends up being 6.1 feet. The opening that Gregory hides in, when being generous with my counting, was 118 pixels tall, averaging out to around 8.3 pixels per inch. 118 pixels, which keep in mind was generous, ends up equaling to about 14.21 inches or 1.18 feet. Going on various forums about children's car seats, I learned that the torso length of kids, while greatly varying, does end up being larger than 14.21 inches on average. Even a 4-year-old ended up having a torso of 15 inches. So Gregory ends up fitting his entire torso into the cavity with room to spare. I double checked the measurements because that just seemed off to me, and it still worked out properly. So Gregory's torso is smaller than that of a 4-year-old. So what the going on here? And it's 7, Vanny. There were a load of complaints about how Vanny was an underutilized villain, and I totally agree. She only shows up like maybe 5 times in the main story, but like every time she does, she seemingly is taunting us instead of actually pursuing us. Like sure, if she gets close enough she will charge, but in my mind that's just her thinking like, oh, I actually have a shot now, might as well try and grab him. But her just casually skipping while going after Gregory and then only really coming at him like 5 times in total is actually pretty solid luck on Gregory's part. Like she always seems to know where Gregory is when she does show up, so if she was around regularly we would have to constantly be on the move. And she also shows up whenever Gregory doesn't have access to Freddy, as if it's like she knows that he doesn't have access, which would only make this worse for him, but it's fine, which in my mind at least is pretty damn lucky. This is one lucky duck, let me tell you. And it's 6, therapy. Gregory might have actually been going to therapy, but we're not certain if this was actually the case. This is possible though thanks to these 16 retro CDs that can be found towards the end of the game, that can be played with a CD player in the hidden sister location room. The retro CDs require Roxanne's eye upgrade on Glamrock Freddy. Out of all 16 tapes though, half of them are for a patient labeled with the numbers 4-6. The other 8 are for Vanessa, however these are marked with the number 7-1. Patient 46 is very odd, never responding with words and never even being named. Some assume that this could be Vanny, however if that were the case, they wouldn't have another designation for her since they just think it's Vanessa. The issue also arises that they're being talked to as if they were a child, which would indicate Gregory, but only people associated with the company end up being evaluated by the shrink. So how could Gregory be associated with this company but not have a guest profile and be wiped from the hard drive? Client 46 also had their last 3 therapists disappear, with one of them turning up dead, and they don't really seem to mind, which lines up with Gregory being willing to kill Vanny in the phaser blast ending. So, maybe it is him. Halfway through into number 5, vandalism. Not only does Gregory damage multiple vents and vent covers throughout the game, but the main objective of the game is actually a crime. Yeah, that's right, you heard me. Us upgrading Freddy using the parts of other animatronics that we acquire through destructive means is indeed vandalism. Or it could be considered destruction of property instead if you wanted to head, I guess, maybe more of a specific route or in that direction. Either way, destroying these animatronics, despite them trying to get to us, is a crime. Technically, we don't know what happens when we get caught by an animatronic. Our screen cuts out before we see any real harm come to us, so we are assuming that we get killed, which is the likely scenario, but it's still merely an assumption. Plus, they're animatronics, so we can't really claim self-defense. I mean, like, I guess it would depend on the jury and the judge as to whether you could claim self-defense or not. Like, yeah, you feared for your life, but does that really call for hitting Roxy with a go-kart, crushing Chica in a trash compactor, and then smashing Monty with a giant bucket? Or could you just have, like, hid inside Freddy's green room the whole time? They could also even use the fact that Freddy was good and helping you as a reason as to why the rest wouldn't have hurt you. So yeah. In at 4, Vanessa. Like I just mentioned, his relationship with Vanessa also seemingly makes no sense. We're willing to kill her in one ending, she kills us in another, but if we free her from William's control, she ends up taking us out for ice cream, and we sit on a hill with Glamrock Freddy's head, no big deal. Like, this lady just spent 6 hours trying to kill you, bro. You think that it would be a little more difficult to just go out and chill with her, even if she did offer you ice cream? Like, would you get into her unmarked van if she offered you ice cream? I doubt it. So like, why do you think this is a good idea? It seems like they're related, or at least know each other somehow, but no connection prior to this has ever been established. So like, what the absolute living hell? And Gregory isn't mentioned in Vanessa's therapy sessions and vice versa. Vanessa isn't mentioned to Gregory in those sessions, if those sessions are for Gregory at least. But even if they are Gregory's, who made him associated with the company? It could have been Vanessa, but wouldn't they have ended up mentioning her odd behavior or asked Vanessa about her younger brother or foster brother or whatever the hell he is? Exactly. This is King 100% certified weird. Getting close to the end, and at number 3, fire. Alright, so during the true ending, otherwise known as the Afton ending or the Burn Trap ending or whatever you want to call it ending, we have to fend off Burn Trap's attempts to take control over Freddy by setting him on fire using what I'm guessing are the mechanisms that Henry used to set fire to the FNAF 6 location. However, I mean, it's pretty convenient how we fall into the room that we need to in this case, with monitors set up connected to the cameras in the various rooms that Burn Trap map enters exclusively, with buttons that light the fires in those various rooms that correspond with the monitor, despite it being far more convenient for Henry to light everything at the same time with one button. Think about it, okay? How are these working still? It's clearly been a while, okay? Based on some comments, apparently the Pizzaplex has been open for at least 4 years, which I don't know if it's accurate, but if it is, these cameras and old computers are still working 4 years after being set on fire. That was enough to ruin the building. Not to mention a sinkhole that had to open up underneath it since we have to travel down an elevator to get there, and like, how is it working after all of that? And if you say that it was Vanny, why make sure the fire systems are still working and then set them to be on separate buttons, okay? Plus, now, these computer monitors are literal dinosaurs. How did they work before the fire, let alone after? Yeah. Penultimately, in at number 2, can drive. Gregory being able to drive the Fazbear van in the van ending is probably one of the biggest WTF moments in this entire game for me. Like, this kid is able to hide in baby strollers and can fit his torso into a 14-inch hole, but is also able to press the pedals on a van, not even a car, but like an actual van. How the living hell is that possible? I guess perhaps he put like a brick on the gas pedal, but that seems like it would be an even worse idea and not very effective, depending on the brick. Like, how the living hell was Gregory able to drive that truck, or even know how to drive it? And how did Freddy allow that? Or like all his safety protocols off or something? Like, what the absolute living hell do we think is going on here? Because I have no clue. Gregory driving a car is 9 out of 10 on the weird scale, and honestly, in my opinion, King 100% certified weird. Like, who the thought that this made sense, and then didn't explain to us how he's driving the van? God damn it. And finally, in at number 1, knowledge. You know what I value more than the cars in my garage? Knowledge. Finally, the knowledge that this kid has exceeds even some of my own. This kid is the size of a 4-year-old, can fit inside Freddy, baby strollers, and various other small areas around the Pizzaplex. He's too small to go driving in one of the go-karts alone, but he knows how to restart generators, operate a trash compactor, start and drive a car, as well as identify a car battery, connect the jumper cables on a car battery properly, and then use those to fix Freddy's whole recharge every hour issue. How the living hell does that make any sense? And how do they solve that issue in the true ending? Because Freddy is still going to need to recharge every hour, and they don't have a van this time around. So how do Freddy and Gregory make it to the hill without Freddy needing to recharge? Or how do they solve that issue? This kid knows more words than I do, but somehow is still the size of a 4-year-old. Maybe even smaller. No, it makes absolutely no sense. And this kid's weird superpower is what makes this game so confusing. It really only makes sense if he's a robot that was supposed to mimic a toddler who's been operational for decades and has been learning this whole time. That's the only way that this makes any sense to me.